welcome everybody. Our full house back there. This is the Concord School Board's April 5th meeting of the Capital Facilities Committee. I'm Barb Higgins as chair. Present tonight are committee members Bob Cotton and Pamela Walsh. President Jim Richards is here as well, and Tom Croto is sitting in, and he will act as a Capital Facilities Committee member for the purpose of this meeting. So I'm going to hand the meeting off to Matt, but I just want to start off by saying, if anyone out there is ever interested in running for school board, it's like getting a master's degree in everything you never thought you needed to learn. And so being the facilities chair, I'm learning a lot more about what goes into building things than just bricks and mortar and that sort of thing. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Matt,
Sure.
and let you sort of explain,
Thank you.
what we've been doing and why we're here, and then
All
we'll
right.
go from there.
Thanks, Barb.
Yeah.
So tonight we want to review the architectural process that we started back talking about in November. And then we want to move on to a little bit of a discussion about the process. We had interviews yesterday. Then we want to move to what the committee's recommendation. I'm going to talk about the committee members here in a second. Want to also recognize Nicole Fox.
I forgot to say you were here.
She's
I'm so
a active member of the community. She's a civil engineer, and we had her as part of the process, which was great. And then we were going to move to a non-public section, the second half of the meeting. So we put together our architectural selection team made up of superintendent, myself, Jack Dunn, Barb Higgins, Bob Cotton, Kara Meeker, and we had included Nicole Fox. So this is somewhat repetitive information, but just looking at a almost 6 month process, we, dating back in November, we released the RFQ. Prior to that, we had talked about RFPs and RFQs, and we had several versions to review. We actually released it, and we followed very close to the schedule we had set forth 4 or 5 months ago. Part of that was an on-site structural or architectural meeting that we had at Runlet. We had 3 architectural firms show up, H.L. Turner, HMFH, and LaValle Brenzinger. We gave the opportunity to, after that meeting, to send us formal questions, and we would also give answers sent back in early January. We had the qualification packages due on Friday, January 27th, and we actually had one firm call and drop out at the last minute, and that was the H.L. Turner firm here in Concord. And I think it was because their schedule was pretty busy, which is good for them, and so the remaining 2 were HMFH and LaValle Brenzinger. We met as a team in February on the 17th to discuss the firms, and we had a little rating scale that we used. We also had everyone on the committee had the individual packages sent to them electronically in hard copies. We then talked about, again, back in November, we were going to strive for looking at sometime in March to have interview dates, not knowing how many or who would apply. We settled on April 4th to make sure it worked for both firms and the committee. And so we did that yesterday, and we're about ready to talk and discuss how that went. And then tonight, we have this Capital Facilities Committee, where I think the committee is going to bring forward a recommendation to the Facilities Committee. And then based on that, we have the upcoming May 1st school board meeting that it would also be presented at. So a summary and some highlights of what we discussed yesterday. We had both architectural firms come here. They brought their sub-consultants and actual team members that would be on the committee. They both did very qualified firms, both great firms. Some takeaways that we discussed is specifically the architectural company, HMFH, specializes on school design. The LaValle Brenzinger does quite a few schools, but they also concentrate on municipal buildings, hospitals, and other commercial style buildings. The team members that they had on their team for HMFH have 20 years with the firm, so they have some longevity with the firm in comparison to, looking at the other firm. Some of the history, and I know that people are familiar with HMFH as a design firm, but they did design the three newer, we can't really say new anymore because that's a while ago, but Abbott Downing, Krista McAuliffe in Millbrook. Some of you might recall they also participated in 2017 by doing a long individual or visioning session. I think Jim and Barb, you guys were here for that. With that was an existing.
Tom was here too.
Yeah. Tom too. Sorry, Tom. We also did the existing conditions report, which they evaluated. They evaluated the condition of the school, mechanical. Structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. What we found yesterday is HMFH presentation was extremely detailed and very, very specific to the work and the previous work that they've had a history doing, specifically in relation to the middle school. Both teams carried essentially the same MEP firms and civil firms. They had RFS Engineering, and they also had Novus Engineering, which is local to the, which is kind of, it's flattering, I'm sure, for those two firms. HMFH had the structural engineer from Foley Buell, which is a New Hampshire firm as well. And then we also just wanted, I think, some things we talked about and was a helpful factor is when we look back after COVID and we started back up in 2021 and into most recently through 2022, July 1st of this past year, all the work we did getting the building aid application into the Department of Education. So I definitely don't want to steal the show because 3 members here are 4 members. Kathleen was part of that too. Like to discuss a little bit about your thoughts and what everyone thought.
I think all of us should share a little bit because it was a pretty interesting morning, and we all had very different takes from it. And actually, a lot of Nicole's insights were really, really helpful for me. I look at it from my lens, and I gave this whole sort of summation of how I felt, and Nicole said, well, you know what? I was exactly on the other side of that, and here's why. And it was incredibly eye-opening for both of us, I think, on just how many different ways there are to look at a decision like this. And so when I think of our constituents, we have people who are going to be straight taxpayers looking at the bottom line price. We have parents who are going to want the best for what they think their child should have. We're going to have teachers that have their ideas about how it should be laid out. Community members that are involved in other aspects of us building a middle school. So there's a lot that goes into it. There was, it was 4 hours. It was a long morning. So a lot of information was shared. At the end of it, my sort of feeling was that we had 2 very equal firms. And the things that caused us to lean one way or the other, at least for me, was ease of transition and ease of communication. We're asking a firm to build a school and we don't even know where it's going to be yet. And once we find that out, we don't even know where it's going to be on the piece of land and how it might look. And what, are we tearing down and building? Are we building somewhere else? Are we remodeling and building? Like, what are we doing? And firms that have a lot of experience with schools are very seamless in this type of thing because they have to make changes and decisions all the time. I think a school building, anything that's funded by taxpayer dollars, is going to create a whole host of issues that are unique to that type of building. So I came away, as sort of the looking at it as an educator, looking at it as a parent, looking at it as a community member, not necessarily looking at the nuts and bolts of what goes into building a school. And I think, Nicole, you can speak well to a lot of those things, and as can Bob. But it was ultimately, I felt like what a lucky board we are that we have to decide between these two. It's 2 really good firms that we could really discuss and look into. So that's how I came away from it. And my support of HMFH is that the 2 people in this district that will be spending the most time on this are Jack and Matt. I'm not going to get up at 4 in the morning for the next 3 years and worry about all of this, and you are. And so when you have a working relationship with someone sort of set in place, and you have a firm that understands the dynamics of our district, that's a chunk of time right there that we don't even need to worry about. So that would be one of my biggest takeaways. I'd be happy to hear from whoever wants to go next.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Thanks. I totally agree with Barb and her sentiment that they're both two excellent, very well qualified firms. They both made very good presentations. A few things that I noted were some of the information that HMFH provided about the previous projects that they did with the district and how successful they were financially, and how few change orders there are. From my professional background, change orders can really delay projects and really create cost overruns very easily. So having a really low rate of those that they talked about, I thought was a really good sign for the future. I noticed that they brought a couple of concepts that they put in their HMFH did that they put in their presentation that were new concepts that they had not provided before, showing that they had sort of been continuing to think about some of the issues related to the existing site. And while they may pick, there may ultimately be a different site chosen, to know that they're still sort of processing what the concerns that have been expressed by the board and the community before. I thought that was really nice. Yeah, there was just a lot of good technical information, and I also think that having a really strong relationship with Matt and Jack sets the district up for success. And so that's why I lean towards HMFH as well. But again, I just want to note that I thought the Valley Brown was also well qualified.
And for people watching, a changeover is?
A change order?
A change order?
So that is,
sorry about that,
after a project is in construction, when there is a problem that has to be addressed, so the design has to be modified to deal with some unexpected situation that's arisen. Thank you.
Yeah. Just want to make sure everyone knows what you're talking about.
Yes.
So I'll just echo the same sentiments. I thought both firms did excellent presentations. I thought both are qualified. We're lucky in that regard. I think I lean towards HMFH for some of the same reasons already articulated. To me, the fact that they have so much continuity and so much tenure, the people who are actually going to be working on this project, working together for 20 years makes a big difference. That's pretty rare in most businesses nowadays. It's important to me that they know Concord, even though they're not from Concord, because of their experience with the elementary schools. And it's interesting, although those were built in 2012, they're still recognized as some of the better schools in the state. So it shows that they do think ahead, that they plan for the long term. And I honestly think that to a certain extent, their continued involvement with the district allows them to hit the ground running better, and depending on how funding goes, etc., we could be faced with a fairly tight timeline in trying to get everything approved. And I think, again, I was comforted by the fact that both of them had the same folks with them from Novus and RFS. And it just strikes me that HMFH, being a specialist in school design, they've done some great work around the state and in their surrounding states. They'll bring a focus to it that is fairly unique. So I agree, and would suggest that we go with HMFH. So.
Kathleen, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I think I would concur with everything that was said, and I think that the one issue for me has, and would be with both organizations, was the importance of marketing it, the importance of communicating to the public about the project, and how that communication comes. It'll come in a lot of different forms, whether it's a forum, a Zoom meeting, a presentation, here at a meeting, whatever it might be, whether we use Facebook and have a Facebook page just for the building project. To me, that's going to be critical. They're both very talented, and I know both of the companies' work, so certainly that was not an easy decision, but to me, the key for them will be to make sure that we have a very strong communication plan. And because the board decided to include the PIO in the budget for next year, we have a part-time person, I think 40%, that we will use that person to, in fact, help them and help me get the message out. So that was my big piece at the meeting.
Well, remember when we built the elementary schools, you could watch it on TV. We had
Right.
Oh, I've done that,
CCTV, and so when you walked in this building and you looked on the wall, there were 3 screens, and you couldn't hear anything, but you just saw all this stuff going on. And then you could turn on public television and sit in your living room and watch it all day if that's what you wanted to do. So this is an organization that's comfortable working very publicly and transparently, which I think in a situation like this is really necessary. The other thing I liked about them was that all 3 projects, each elementary school represented a way that this building might need to be built. We had kids moved and demolition and build on site. Then we had kids in school where demolition was going on next door and then buildings were being, like, they've done all the scenarios that we might have. So, and they've done them here. So, with our district and all that. Pam, what would you like to?
Can you talk about the prices and the cost differences between the two?
Sure. So we don't have formal prices for either firm because there are still a couple of unknowns, location,
Yep.
primarily being that. But when I talk to them about their percentage fees based on overall construction cost, I think one was 6.78%, and I think HMFH was hovering around 7%. So
They were both very close.
I look at that in a couple of different aspects. You could, if you're really narrowing down, they're relatively the same, but knowledge of the prior work that they've done, to Barb's point, that wherever we land this, it's going to be a tricky project. But based on a lot of the knowledge they have already on this particular building, this project, that could accelerate the time frame. Their ramp-up period would be less, in my opinion, because they're so engrossed in the process so far. So their fees seem to be fairly similar. So I hope that answers what you're...
I would just add one thing to that. They are fairly similar, but HMFH, we didn't actually ask LaValle Brenzinger, but HMFH made it very clear that they were also willing to negotiate their fee. And I believe Jack said that the last time we worked with them, he did indeed negotiate the fees.
Right.
So they're anxious to work with us.
And they were, go.
And the number they gave us was 6.87%. So just a touch different than what Matt said, 8.7.
Was that LaValle?
That was LaValle,
That was
yeah,
LaValle.
LaValle.
it's
So
close.
that's why it's even closer when they said
And-
7.
And they came in well under with the elementary schools, and that, they
7.5.
yes, and they. So I feel confident that when they see a way to cut a cost that doesn't cut quality, that they'll do it. That they're not going to be hung up on
Sure.
getting their big bang for the buck. Of course, they want to be paid, but they understand the they were very helpful with us before.
And Nicole could tell you, Kathleen could tell you, anyone involved in gym, construction projects, it's highly unlikely that they just sail through and they're perfectly smooth. There's always going to be, but something that always stuck in my mind is we had meetings every single Monday at one location, but all the contractors came in. They were at the table with us from start to finish, pre-design and start to finish, and those same people are the same people that have had the longevity and would be involved in this project from start to finish. So there's definitely a level of working with people and success of what we had. So,
Pam?
And I certainly respect that, and as someone who, likes to use the same contractor because they did a good job the first time. But, I do think we will have to respond to questions about sort of whether this was truly a fair and open process, because it's the same company that we used before. It's the same company who developed the preliminary designs. So how would you respond to that we've done our due diligence and we're not just going with what's comfortable, because there's a higher bar to doing that in public contracting.
100%.
I brought that same thing up in the
Yeah.
you or me yesterday, Pam.
I'm glad you brought that up. We talked about this through the fall as we were talking about our process. We talked about how we were going to advertise this, how we were going to publish it. We sent it out to a number of different firms. We published it online. We had it on our website. We published it in the newspaper. We were, quite frankly, when we had that public, mandatory public meeting for the architects, it's kind of comical. We had it at Runlet, and we used one of the classrooms, but I was feeling that we were going to get so many people that we were going to have to look at doing it in the gym. When only 3 firms showed up, I was shocked. But you also have to realize people are watching. When any new project comes out, they're doing their due diligence. They're looking to see what are they doing in Concord, what are the factors, what do we have on our workload. So I can't speak to why we didn't have more, but I was very, very shocked that we didn't. Some feedback I had heard is it's a tricky project, it's very tight timelines, and some folks probably just said, you know what, we can't commit to that right now.
And a follow-up question. So our goal would be to award by May.
Right.
If we do not receive building aid this year, there is a good chance that this will be put off another 2 years. I mean, the board hasn't discussed that, but given the amount of money, I think that's a scenario we need to be considering. Would we be locked into the same firm then for the future, or because a lot can change in 2 years? Their leadership could change. Would we be? There could be a lot more openings in other firms that we'd want to consider 2 years from now.
I think Bob mentioned there's a whole negotiations part, that we would on fees. I think we would. Well, I know we would involve a legal standpoint to do this, and I think we would I would suggest we build in any L clauses, so we're always protecting the district in any scenario, should it be a scenario that you just mentioned.
Well, and they might feel the same way, that 2 years, they might be different in 2 years. It might not be feasible for them
You
either.
don't know. Right.
Just to follow up a little bit further though, Pam, I mean, this is something we did talk about a little bit yesterday, and more in our session afterwards, frankly. But I think the truth of the matter is yes, we might have to wait. But you also have to be shovel-ready when you do get the money. So that there's probably work that needs to be done, either anticipating that we're going to get some of the money, or even if we have to put it off for 2 years. So I think what I'm trying to say is the smart way to do this probably is to phase it, essentially. And, you know, that the work that we need to do now in anticipation of maybe getting the money is not gonna be wasted necessarily in the later part. So, I mean, as long as we have a way to get out of it if we change our mind.
You know, but I think, like, I would hate to lock us into a school design,
Yeah.
you know, 4 or 5 years before a school could possibly open, because as we've seen, things have changed. And even in the you look at the elementary schools, and some of them have really good digital learning spaces, and some, because that was sort of on the cusp, then.
Yeah,
So, I think having some flexibility so we're not building, but
Anecdotally, HMFH did say that they've had experiences where the total design had to change. And they had, they've had experiences where something was designed and then the school district decided to move
Yeah.
the site.
there
Completely.
could be a new board who says, you know what, we do want 5th grade in the
Yeah.
middle school.
What did I hear that?
Not good for
It's not going to be me, but
any, not good for
What
any
matter
10-year-old.
then?
it's not just about my kid.
Is there anything else? So I know that I use this analogy all the time. It's like the old days of developing pictures in a black bag, and you can't see what you're doing, but you better do it right, because you won't get a picture if you do it wrong. And a lot of our steps, I mean, Pam, you bring up a good point. We don't even know if we have building aid yet, but I don't feel that we should withhold on making this decision. And I just think we need to be mindful that in our negotiations, we have a working conversation with HMFH that, a lot of this is contingent upon us being able to pay them. So I guess what I would like to do is entertain a motion that the Capital Facilities Committee recommend to the full board hiring HMFH to begin the middle school building process. So I would,
Moved.
and is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. And then we'll just vote. All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Awesome, no opposed. So we will bring this forward at the May meeting, and I appreciate sort of trying to get this piece done, because then all of the lead-up work and all of the stuff that can take forever, it looks like you're doing nothing, can start now, as opposed to waiting. And hopefully the money gods will forever be in our favor, but who knows, so. All right, what next, my friend? What next?
All right, well, I, again, just want to thank everyone who participated. Nicole, that was awesome having you on the team, and hope to do more in the future. So next part, I'm going to show you a motion to go into non-public.
Right, okay. So, non-public agenda, I move that we go into non-public based on non-public RSA 91-A3, Roman numeral 2, letter D, consideration of the acquisition, sale, or lease of real or personal property, which, if discussed in public, would likely benefit a party or parties whose interests are adverse to those of the general public. Do I have
Second.
second?
Thank
We
you,
don't need to
Nicole.
roll call this, do we? Can we just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think we do.
Motion, Barb, who seconded?
I did.
Yeah.
Okay,
all right. So Pam?
pay attention.
There, Ms.
Aye.
Walsh, aye. Mr. Cotton?
All right,
Mr. Croto?
Aye.
And I say aye. So we are,
we have to take a break.
yes, in non-public, yep. That I-